I actually don't watch movies I've been in, so I'm never considering how they're going to be perceived by an audience. I'm like my harshest critic, so I go into every project very worried that I'm going to screw it up and really working hard to try my best to not. The Social Network, Mark Zuckerberg.
You are probably going to be a very successful computer person. You're going to go through life thinking that girls don't like you because you're a nerd. And I want you to know from the bottom of my heart that that won't be true. It'll be because you're an asshole.
It was my job at all times to kind of think about my role as somebody virtuous and noble and well-meaning, because that's how people tend to think of themselves, irrespective of how sometimes their behavior is perceived. I was just trying to understand the best possible version of this person and then play the scenes, which don't exactly present the best possible version of that person. But inside, he is thinking that. And as an actor, you're in this very strange place where, I've played movie villains before. You always have to think of yourself as the hero of the story. You always have to think of yourself as well-intentioned, even if, in a superhero movie, the villain is killing people. And, he has his own logic and his own reason. And it's the actor's job more than anybody's to kind of figure out what that is, even if an audience might never be able to tell.
You don't think I deserve your attention?
I think if your clients want to sit on my shoulders and call themselves tall, they have a right to give it a try, but there's no requirement that I enjoy sitting here listening to people lie. You have part of my attention. You have the minimum amount. The rest of my attention is back at the offices of Facebook, where my colleagues and I are doing things that no one in this room, including and especially your clients, are intellectually or creatively capable of doing. Did I adequately answer your condescending question?
I truly don't read about the real person that much, probably because I don't want to feel an association with it. And I really only thought of the character as a movie character. I thought of the character that I was playing as any kind of fictional character, where I'm not kind of trying to compare what I'm doing to a real person. The idea is to kind of play a character, and in drama, characters have to be, especially if they're leading characters, have to be understandable in some way, not necessarily always sympathetic, but understandable in some way. So it was my job to kind of at least understand where he's coming from. And this is a guy who felt socially excluded, but who's probably smarter than everybody else and figured out a way to become socially included, but only if he can be in complete control of it. And so there's a kind of unsustainability to that. But I understood at least the character, not the person. I understood the character's righteousness. I understood the character's inner life, why he would feel resentment and anger and rage and superiority. All that stuff is easy to justify when you're acting and when you're trained as an actor to think about getting inside the character's head. The people who are making the movie, the writer and director, are the best in their fields. I did have this feeling that I could do anything, I could try anything, and it would all be okay. Partly that's because the director does tons of takes, so you can kind of experiment, knowing that if it's really far off, they just won't use it. So I played the character two different ways. We would do half the takes kind of in this kind of socially removed way, where the character is not kind of picking up on social cues or perceiving other characters' inner lives. And then we would do the other half a little more what I would call just natural, somebody who is a little more socially engaged. And then they, I guess, put together a version of the movie that probably incorporates both. So the character probably appears really disengaged at times in an unnerving way, and probably at other times feels very passionate about what he's talking about. If I had to kind of think about how the movie's perceived from the outside, I would only be able to make a guess, which is that it's a really well-made art piece that is talking about something that has existed forever, which is kind of, people who are probably not the best managers getting control of a large group of people, and the organization kind of falling, into the traps of whatever that person's personal flaws are. And that's a really compelling story. Citizen Kane obviously did it so many years earlier. It's talking about a transition in time where socialization kind of switched from in-person interactions and telephone calls and what we might call slow conversation, slow socialization, and went into the fast food of socialization where you can be in touch with hundreds of people at once, and just like fast food, it becomes like less nutritious, each individual relationship. And so I think it's showing that, and it's doing it in such an interesting way, because instead of doing it on the kind of ground level of showing people whose social lives are being diminished in value because of this technology, it's actually showing the people who created the technology almost foisting this, in my opinion, unsustainable worldview onto the public at large. So I guess there's that kind of thing, which kind of raises these big stakes and speaks to a moment in time. Adventureland, James Brennan. Yeah, I'll meet you inside.
Okay.
I'll meet you inside.
Okay.
Okay. Shit.
Boner! You got a boner! Brennan's got a boner!
That movie for me was like, it was like my first movie with that like level of part, and I was just so nervous the whole time. I do remember reading the script and just being kind of shocked that it existed, because this was like probably 2007, 2008. Greg had just directed Superbad, and the movies that were being made around that time was like really Judd Apatow style broader comedies. Characters are improvising, and it didn't have as much of a melancholy undertone. And so when I read that script, I was kind of just shocked that anybody was making it, because it was so different than everything I had been reading at the time, which was just more broadly comedic, and which I was not as good at as an actor. When I met him, I just said, I can't believe you wrote this. It's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And he said that, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. I want to make like this kind of sweet melancholy thing. And then it's so funny because when they ended up putting out the movie, they made it look like the kind of broadest version of itself. And it's not that at all. I hear all the time people love the movie Adventureland because I think it has this real heart to it that, gives it a certain kind of longevity.
Little more than 40% of these fish are dead.
I'm amazed at how tiny my paycheck is. I've been working doubles.
But we are doing the work of pathetic, lazy morons.
Adventureland had some of the greatest comic actors in the world. Bill Hader and Kristen Wiig were in the movie. And normally I would feel, I think, really, over my head, out of my depth, in deep water when I'm used to shallow water. I don't know what the expression is, but I wouldn't feel comfortable. The movie had this really kind of like melancholic, dramatic undertone, and I felt actually it was like my job as the central character to kind of like maintain that. So in fact, I just felt so glad to be able to work with people like that.
Why don't you give the kid a fucking panda?
Here you go. Here's your panda.
Yeah, thanks.
When we were doing Adventureland, Kristen Stewart was 17, which is like, sounds like not a very young person, but when you're doing a movie, you're like constantly aware of their age because 17-year-olds can't work past a certain time and they have to go to school and everything. And she was just like the most powerful co-actor I've ever met until that point. We did a scene in a car where we're driving over a bridge and it's this kind of sweet montage. And I'm just like staring at her and I think I say one word and I think she says one word. Hey, can we go somewhere?
Yeah.
And we parked the car on the bridge. They were setting up the lights. We had a few minutes in between setups. And I went to the director, Greg Mottola, and I said, this is like a movie star. I said, I don't know what a movie star is, but I think now I do. She had a certain kind of intensity and lived-in quality. I kind of like had never seen it before. I'd worked with like amazing actors because I had grown up doing theater, working with like great actors. But I don't think I'd ever seen anybody that just had this kind of like innate quality that was so engaging and like preternaturally, like emotionally accessible. I've worked with her now a few times and I've had that same experience each time. She makes me nervous because she's like has an intimidating presence. Luckily, the movies we did together, I think actually all, I think support that relationship. Greg Mottola to this day is like one of like the two nicest people I've ever worked with. I'll never forget it because it made such an impact on me, more as a director even than an actor. But one day on set, it was a scene where I'm like saying goodbye to my parents because I'm going to the big city. I don't think you even hear the dialogue in the movie, but basically I just had like a panic attack and it was the first time I ever had a panic attack on set. And I just like shut down and I was not able to like, I just, you have that strange out of body sensation. And I went to Greg and I said, I am so sorry. I just had a panic attack, I think. I don't know what happened, and I'm so sorry, I screwed up the scene. And he took me aside. He didn't talk to me in front of people. He took me aside and he said, I am not an actor. I don't understand how you're not having panic attacks at every single moment on a movie set. You're being scrutinized. You're using your own emotions. You're in a costume that's not your costume. Somebody's done your hair. You have makeup on and you're standing there emoting something that is not true to your life. And I just had this weight lifted off of my shoulders. I was probably 25 years old, and I had been a kind of a nervous performer up until that point. And then when he gave me permission to feel nervous, suddenly I didn't anymore. And as a director now, I always just think what the actors are doing here is so exposing and vulnerable, and I appreciate every moment that they're on set. And it just changed my perception of how we could think about actors. Batman versus Superman, Lex Luthor. Hi, hello, Lex, it is a pleasure. Ow, wow, that is a good grip. You should not pick a fight with this person. With a movie where there's a real canon, like Batman vs. Superman, and the part that I was playing, there's a kind of canon, certain expectations from an audience. There's nothing that I could personally do besides playing my role as good as I can play it, thinking about this character's history and what made him so malevolent and so angry and self-hating. To me, that it felt like playing any other role. The fact that it has this kind of specific expectations and historical perceptions is something that I'm not in control of. And I guess if I were to try to control it, I probably wouldn't do that great a job as an actor, because I'm thinking about this final product rather than what I'm supposed to be thinking about, which is what would this character feel in this moment, and why does he feel that way, and how could I kind of get myself as close to those shoes as possible. Playing in a Batman movie doesn't mean I have to do my job any differently. In fact, it requires me to do my job at the highest possible level, because the movie is such a big movie and my part was so wonderfully written and special. So I love doing it. No, I loved it. It was so funny because, when you're acting in a movie, typically your job doesn't change based on the budget. Typically, you're sitting in front of a camera and you're doing scene work and you're thinking about your character's inner life and your emotional experience. And that doesn't really change if there's a kind of huge green screen and a styrofoam Batcave behind you. It's really, the job is the same, which is this very kind of intimate emotional experience. It was just funny to be on that set because I felt like I was doing my regular job, but just in front of, multi-million-dollar sets. And it was amazing to see the artisans. They get the best artisans in the world to work on these movies because, they're paying the most money. And so you get to see some of the most amazing art down to every prop, every set piece, every painting on the wall that's bespoke and made for that particular scene. And it was just exhilarating. I figured out way back, if God is all powerful, he cannot be all good. And if he is all good, then he cannot be all powerful. And neither can you be. They need to see the fraud you are with their eyes. My character, I guess you could call him xenophobic. He viewed Superman as an alien who was a threat to the society that I held dear. Now we think of politics like that as kind of xenophobic and, anti-immigrant, you might call. I mean, it's strange to even speak about it in kind of modern political terms. But the way I thought about it is, here is somebody who's coming who is who's more powerful than our civilization. And they pose a threat in the way you might think now of AI posing a threat. Something this powerful should not exist. If we were making the movie today, I think my analog would probably be that Superman represents some kind of AI, where we don't know what it can do. And yes, it has this power, but we can't control what that power is. So why even take the risk? When you think about it that way, it's very easy to get into the head of that character because he has a kind of making a good point, which is a lot of people making now. AI is unknown and therefore more dangerous than we can possibly conceive of. That's the way I guess I work as an actor. You're trying to kind of get inside the emotional inner life of your character and justify their behavior, however different it might be from your own. Zombieland, Columbus. So I'm on my way from my college dorm in Austin, Texas, to Columbus, Ohio, where I'm hoping my parents are still alive. Even though we were never really close, it'd just be nice to see a familiar face, or any face that doesn't have blood dripping from its lips and flesh between its teeth. The Zombieland movies are these unexpectedly beloved movies, I say unexpectedly only because they're quite violent, so you don't expect people that come up to you all the time and said, I finally watched that movie with my family. I've been waiting to watch that movie with my family. It's just not what you expect from a movie like that. But when I think about it, and when I think about what the experience actually was like doing it, it had this very kind of warm feeling, similar to Adventureland being kind of a kind of sweet comedy. This felt like kind of a sweet genre movie. The characters were sweet. The four of us are all dramatic actors, and so we kind of approached the movie from the same, dramatically responsible place of who are these people, what are they going through? I remember like Woody Harrelson's character has a thing where like you think he's talking about missing his dog and it turns out he's missing his kid. I mean, it's this incredibly high stakes, dramatic, emotional circumstances. And so we were all playing it legitimately. And so the movie was really funny, but it also had this kind of like emotional quality to it. I guess that makes people love these movies so much, is that it feels like the characters are relatable, even though the circumstances are so, extreme and absurd.
Losing Buck.
That's his puppy.
I'll tell you, I never thought I could love anything like Buck. Just the day he was born, I just lost my mind.
I just finished my 5th project with Woody Harrelson 3 days ago. I've worked with Woody Harrelson more than I've worked with anybody in my life, which seems so strange only because we're so different. I just remember improvising with him in the first Zombieland, being so impressed that he improvises in character. He doesn't improvise jokes. And I just love that because I like improv, but I don't love improv where you're kind of just throwing random jokes in to make the people around you laugh. I love improvisation when it's in the spirit of the character. I just remember thinking this guy is just an unbelievable genius. And the way I think about him in general is like he's a true unusual artist and a brilliant one, but the public perceives him as this kind of like regular guy. And he is a kind of regular guy, but he's a very unusual artist. He just has this kind of genial quality that I think makes him very relatable. But I don't think that's like by design. Now You See Me, J. Daniel Atlas. That was too fast. I'll do it again. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you see one?
Yes.
Do you have one in mind?
Yes.
Now, do you see your card here?
No.
That's because you're looking too closely. And what have I been telling you all night? The closer you look, the less you see. When I signed on to the movie Now You See Me, they told me that they were like changing the script, and if I had input into my character, now was the time to give it. The script was great and everything, but they allowed me to kind of alter my character, and I remember just thinking, I want to play something I never played before. Can I just play this person who is, brash and arrogant and really confident and has no self-doubt? And it's just this really weird experience where when I was acting in the movie, and I just literally finished the 3rd one less than a week ago, I just feel great about myself. It's this strange thing. Now, a lot of characters I play are kind of like tortured, self-hating, misanthropic, self-aware kind of people. And when I'm playing the Now You See Me character, which I've gotten to do now 3 times, I just feel so great. At the end of the day, I think the set went perfectly. After a scene, I think it went perfect. Between takes, I'm excited about doing another take. I have no self-doubt. And it's because I'm living in the spirit of this character who has no self-doubt. I might be terrible in the movie. I don't know. It's the only times I really feel like I'm great. And it's because the character feels like he's great. And it's like just the biggest psychological and emotional relief for me to do these movies. I hope they do 10 more. It'd be a little difficult to make it rain, right? That would be something that only God can do, right? Because I'm gonna do something that God can't do. I'm not just gonna make it clear up. No. I'm gonna make it actually stop. My relationship with magic has not changed as much as my relationship with the public thinking that I have a relationship with magic. Like, I can't really do anything wonderful magically, but that's because like the people who do it, and I've worked now with like the greatest magicians in the world, because of course they're like our consultants, because it's like a big movie. We have access to like the greatest magicians. What they do is such a skill set that requires just years and years of practice. I mean, I'm obviously not at that level, so I know a few things. And this new movie, Now You See Me 3, we tried to do most kind of effects in camera as opposed to like computer-generated effects. A lot of the magic that the characters do in this movie are not like just sleight of hand. I mean, they're huge, like Rube Goldberg, MIT-level thought experiments, like making it rain and then making the rain stop. This is like a thing that you can do practically, but it's just it requires like just a brilliant mind. And so I actually don't have to do that much magic, but because I'm so associated with these movies, I do often get asked to do magic on the street, and I usually just quickly change the subject and ask them where they're from and say, nice to meet you. At the end of the tour, David Lipsky. If I could, I'd say to David that living those days with him reminded me of what life is like. instead of being a relief from it. And I tell him it made me feel much less alone. The End of the Tour is a movie I love so much. The relationship I had with the director, James Ponsoldt, was one of the highlights of my life, as well as the relationship with Jason Segel, the other actor. It felt like we were really on the same team. And it was a very immersive experience. We were all in Michigan during like one of the coldest winters that they had seen on Lake Michigan. It just felt like we would wake up and shoot the movie all day and then go to sleep and then wake up and shoot the movie all day. That sounds like a typical job, but what I really mean is that it was so immersive that we never left each other's sides. It's the two of us in every moment in the movie, and we shot long hours, and it was freezing, and it was really small budget, and so we were basically shooting like 15 hours instead of just working 25 days. We worked 19 days and 15 hours, you know. The character I was playing was a deeply envious person. He is interviewing a writer that he's deeply, deeply envious of, and it was very uncomfortable for me and very emotional for me to be like in that role. I'm sorry, I'm not asking for like sympathy. This is the nature of being an actor, but it just hit me in an incredibly personal way. I don't know if I was going through something in my career at that time or something that for some reason just mirrored what was happening in that movie, and it just was killing me. I really couldn't stop crying during the scenes, and then the director told me, stop crying during the scenes. But it was just like hitting me in an emotional way that I couldn't explain even to like a therapist, which I was probably mistakenly not going to at the time. And I just had these very strong feelings for Jason, the actor, who's really wonderful in the movie, and he's an imposing person even, and all these very profound feelings of inadequacies were like really eating me alive during that movie, and partly because there was no break. I was just in this world, and it actually felt really, I don't know what the word is, but it really felt actually quite not healthy for me. I was glad when the movie ended, even though it was really one of the most creatively inspiring experiences that I've ever had.
You're not gonna make me look like I'm one of those insane old women who talks to their dogs, are you?
No, don't worry about it.
I am worried about it. My dogs are going to be offended.
The dogs are not going to read this article.
I gotta tell you, they've never taken to a man who they've taken to you.
Jason and I got along like as good as two people in the world can get along. We were both happy to be doing this movie. I would say even more for him because it was such a departure for him, and I think it really gave him an opportunity to show how wonderful he can be in a dramatic role. For me, my part was a little more like kind of similar to myself. And so he was so thrilled to be there. And I was thrilled because I love the movie, but also very just vulnerable because of the part I was playing and how it dovetailed with my life in an uncomfortable way. And yet when we were on set, we would not stop laughing in between takes. I've never laughed that hard. We were just in hysterics because we just got along so well. Because we weren't in a comedy, I think we needed that catharsis. So we were just laughing all the time. I still remember the jokes that we had on set as just being like some of the funniest, dumbest jokes I've ever heard in my life because the scenes were so fraught. He was a character that was suicidal and an addict, and I was a character who hated himself to such a degree that he put himself in the line of fire with this more talented person. It was really just the highs and lows, and they were as high as possible and then as low as possible because the scenes were really fraught, and the time in between the scenes were really funny. The Squid and the Whale, Walt Berkman. You weren't even a writer until recently. You just bailed on Dad because he's not as successful as he used to be and hasn't gotten the recognition he deserves.
You sound like your father.
No, I'm glad I sound like him. You disgust me.
You're being a shit, Walt!
I know for the director it was a very personal story, and I was playing him as a young man. And so I can understand now, why the part was really sensitive to cast. But at the time, it just felt like this very exciting and also nerve-wracking, lingering experience because it took place over the course of like a few months that, I would go back for this movie audition for the same 3 people in the room. It was like this kind of lingering thing, and it was so good. I mean, the script was so good. Everybody thought so because I was friends with young actors, and everybody was just like, this is unbelievable, and what a great part for a young man. It was in New York, and the people who were making it were just so smart and talented. It felt like I was part of like the cool kids table for like a few months. I don't know how to describe it other than that it felt like we were working on like an amazing art piece that was really special, but at the same time, very funny And I just felt, I guess, like a kind of pressure to live up to it. It shot very quickly. It's something like 20 days. They even had to cut out these amazing scripted scenes because there was no time or money to do these scenes. And it's funny because looking back, the movie's like a classic movie and it's, beloved and will live on forever. But at the time, it was literally like, oh, we can't shoot this great scene from this great script that everybody loves because there's no time and money. So instead we're gonna do it in a hallway or a science class or something, when it was like this really funny choreographed scene. It really felt cool. I was going to Brooklyn every day. I don't know, I have the visceral memories of that movie that just made me feel like I was part of something really unusual.
I regret sometimes I wasn't more of a free agent when I was younger. There was a woman who approached me at a party at George Plimpton's after my first book. She was very sexy. I could have gone home with her.
Why didn't you?
I was with your mother.
Oh, right, of course. Well, you should have probably done it. It didn't stop her.
The crew was made up of like some of the greatest artisans in the world. Like our cinematographer was Wes Anderson's cinematographer. Also, the other half of the crew was Noah's former students at Vassar, and they were my age. So I was like friends with the young crew members who were like essentially interning on the movie. And yet we were working for like the greatest like gaffer in New York City was the gaffer. And so it was this really kind of unusually bifurcated set experience. It was great for me because I got along with people who are in my kind of generation, but I also knew I was working with these people who are amazing. It just felt like the script was so perfect, we didn't have to do anything. I've been involved in a few movies where it felt like the script is so good, you just have to show up and, I don't know, not try to put a spin on something, you know what I mean? Not try to like, how can I take this in the direction that I want to take it in? Sometimes you do that in a movie and it's really helpful because maybe the movie is missing a little personality or something. And so you feel like as an actor, I have a little bit more responsibility here to kind of take it in a more interesting direction. And with that movie, it just felt like this is so good. We could just, we just stand in front of a white wall and do this and it would be great. The set was very quick moving. Every scene was shot, if I'm remembering correctly, very quickly, except for the very last scene where the character I play goes into like this museum of natural history and goes up to this diorama. I remember that being shot from multiple angles on a dolly with an arm moving up to do a beautiful move. And I remember feeling like, oh, suddenly this all feels like very real and less spontaneous. Fleishman is in trouble, Toby Fleishman.
For the 10th time that day, Toby was forced to ask the question that occurred to him nearly every few minutes since his separation. How did I get here? How did I become a divorced guy? How could my kids be so much like these people when they also so resembled me?
I loved the book Fleishman is in Trouble. I loved the writer. She's one of my best friends and she's just a genius. She's a creative powerhouse. And I really loved doing the show. The weird part of the show is that my life is being narrated by somebody.
He gathered all he had to go in there. Whatever it was, he could handle it.
And so what you're seeing in my character is essentially like the leading character in somebody else's book. And it's strange to play that. There's no real way to play that as an actor. You can't play the kind of like meta textual remove. The show presents itself in this really kind of brilliant observational way where you're looking at my character from outside. But as an actor, you just can't think of it that way at all. As an actor, you have to just kind of think of what is my character going through now, and you don't think of yourself as a cog, you think of yourself as the lead. It was kind of interesting to do that, and I always knew that there would be this other element in the show. I was working with just some of the greatest actors. Lizzie Kaplan, who I've worked with a bunch of times now, Claire Danes, who's to this day maybe like the most intensely dramatic scene partner I've ever had. She's just on another level. I love her. And Adam Brody, who I just got along with so well, and we had this really kind of funny, strangely tepid masculine relationship in this show. I loved the show so much without even appreciating what it was doing on this kind of other level. And because I don't watch myself, I've never appreciated the show as this other thing. I've always just appreciated being this character.
You have to understand that Toby was not exactly a desired property in his youth.
You're so handsome.
What I learned about online dating is that I personally would not fare well on those platforms. And I'm so lucky that I met my wife before the internet. I know when I go to parties, I'm not a good party goer because I'm not fun. And so I know when I have somebody cornered in a room, I could talk to them and I appear like a human being. On my naps, I wouldn't appear like a person, and at parties, I won't appear like a person. And I'm kind of just happy I'm 41 and not 21 because I existed at a time where I could, I guess, thrive more. The Double, Simon James, and James Simon.
You're not thinking of killing yourself, are you?
Sorry? It's a simple question.
No.
Should I put him down as a no?
Put him down as a maybe.
The Double was my other favorite collaboration of all time with Richard Ayoade, the director, who is my idol and a genius and one of my best friends. Brought such artistry to this movie, to every little moment. But I will say it was the first time I felt like this is a gift. Normally I feel nervous on sets. I know when the big scenes are coming up and you feel a little anxious as they approach. This movie, I felt like this is the gift. I was, I think, like, 30 at the time I filmed it, and I've been acting since I was young. So I was like, oh, this is what I've been working for, to feel this. And I just wish it could have gone on forever. I felt like I was there to use the full extent of my artistry. I was playing two characters, this kind of like shy character and this very brash, obnoxious character. And I just felt like this is everything that I know how to do well. This is everything that I've worked on in my life and in my craft and with drama school and with acting in movies and acting in movies that were not good and acting in parts that were thankless. This is the gift. This is this is just a gift. I felt that one other time with a movie, The Art of Self-Defense. I was on set just feeling like, God, if I could just do this every day, be in this character's shoes every day, I feel like I know exactly what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm working to the best of my abilities. Even directing a movie now that I'm acting in, that I wrote, I still don't feel like I'm working to the best of my abilities, even though it is like all the things I can do. With The Double and The Art of Self-Defense, I just felt like if I can have 2 more experiences like this in my life, where I feel like I'm working to the best of my abilities, I will be very happy. A Real Pain, David Kaplan. The movie in some ways answers a question I have, which is I'm kind of a depressive, so I kind of walk around feeling not bad for myself, but feeling bad I would say maybe more about myself or something. I then punish myself. How could I possibly feel that? There's wars going on all over the world and hurricanes. How could I possibly feel bad about myself? My life is so comfortable. I'm so lucky. I have the luck of, 10,000 people. I'm so lucky. The movie's trying to kind of contend with that. It's these 2 characters who both have what I would call modern day demons. My character has medicated OCD, and obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety, right? And Kieran's character has some darker but individual demons. Grandma never pitied herself. In fact, she always told me she was grateful for her struggle.
Well, that's just it. What she endured, that gave her hope, right?
Yes, in fact, she used to tell me that first generation immigrants work some menial job. They drive cabs, they deliver food. Second generation, they go to good schools and they become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And the third generation lives in their mother's basement and smokes pot all day. I mean...
She said that?
And they go back to Poland and they're actually trying to confront their family's history, which was much more fraught and objectively more terrifying than their lives. Trying to ask the question of what pain is valid? Is it okay? Because I say in the movie, I know my pain is unexceptional, so I don't feel the need to burden everybody with it. But Kieran's character, I say, it feels like he's using his pain constantly as a weapon to co-opt social situations. I guess that's all. When I say autobiographical, I guess it's all the stuff I think about all the time. And this movie is kind of, let's say a fictional discussion of those questions I have. Kieran and I met, which I didn't remember, at an audition for Adventureland. I was already cast in the part and he came in to audition for a character that is constantly hitting me in the balls. And in the audition, he also squeezed my nipples very hard and wouldn't let go. It wasn't in the script and the director said cut, and I think he didn't hear me, so he was yelling at me. And so he just continued to hold me, and I remember just being so intimidated by him, even though I was the one technically with the comfortable position because I had already been cast in the movie and other people were auditioning for his part. And I remember just thinking, this guy is so talented and so brazen and so intimidating and so comfortable with himself. And this must have stayed with me in my mind because the movie is really that relationship. He kind of manhandles me and bullies me and charms me, and I find him very intimidating, but he's this also kind of spark of light. Maybe this stayed in my mind because when somebody suggested him to me, it was immediate. Of course, that's who should play it. I didn't consciously associate back to being squeezed in my breasts, but I guess I must have had that in my unconscious.